So, Grounded 2 has been out for almost 2 months, and there have been plenty of discoveries made in Brookhollow Park. But even now, more clues about what's going on can be discovered, and in a recent playthrough, I found a hidden letter from Wendell's wife Trudy to Wendell, and it could hold massive implications about what is going on in the story of Grounded 2. So in today's video, I'll touch on that, along with a few other clues that could help us in figuring out some of the mysteries that may be buried in Brookhollow Park. The briefcase. Finding the combination and popping up in the briefcase are one of the more exciting discoveries in Grounded 2 so far. But upon opening it, you're left with a lackluster reward. A milk molar, some mints, and some of the spicy candies. Overall, not a terrible haul, but it's not quite the reward you would expect from the effort you have to go in to get both combinations and pop this briefcase open. However, if you look closer, there are some things that stand out. Up first is Caroline Hudson. This is a character that has not appeared so far in the game, but her business card is located in the briefcase. She's the event coordinator for the park division. And when you look at the card in a certain light, text appears, and upon closer inspection of the text, it's actually the speech notes from Wendell's speeches that are written down on note cards around the podium. Now, this could be due to them reusing assets, but it could also be a clue hidden in the briefcase, perhaps implying that the note cards were written on top of these business cards and envelopes and left a clue behind. At which case, perhaps Caroline Hudson could have something to do with Wendell's speech, and she could be a character of significance in the future updates. I, however, invite you to look at these note cards yourself and see if you can make out the text. Perhaps there's something there that I missed. The next item to hold some significance in the briefcase is a photograph of the newest executive to run the evil organization of Ominent, Sloan Beaumont, and it's signed with her name and a heart. Now, this could just be more world building, but it could also be a clue that whoever the owner of the briefcase is could hold some infatuation with Sloan Beaumont herself. And for a lot of people, this is the first time you'll see this photograph. However, you can locate it much earlier in the game in the onboarding facility. That's right. If you look in the locker room right before you get to the first resource analyzer, on top of the lockers, partially hidden by a hat, is the exact same photograph of Sloan Beaumont, with a signature and a heart. This could mean that the signature and the heart on the photograph are not as unique as they first appear, or it could also be that the person that owns the briefcase could have worked at this onboarding facility. Perhaps it could be employee 555. Perhaps it was Caroline Hudson. I think right now there's just too little information on Sloan Beaumont to make a definitive answer, but I do think it is important to take note and keep it in mind for future updates. The onboarding facility actually has a plethora of clues. At this point, most people have found employee 555's missing poster, where there's no death date and it's assumed that this person is still alive. And I believe because of the purple and the 555 number, they could hold significance in the story. Even further than that, if you look in the statue, you find a file labeled Boiled Science, which reads, following updated grilling protocol instructions acquired through proprietary archival data, we hope to process upwards of 5 times the previous known limit quantity of raw science using water as a medium. This time it's the right one, boys. The updated grilling protocol we obtained appears to have been somehow deficient. The experiment proceeded as planned until superheated water vapor disturbed the stabilized plasma and caused a catastrophic release of energy. Be glad we conducted those experiments at night, otherwise, we'd have an eyewitness issue to solve. Essentially stating that this boiled science caused an explosion, which could explain the explosion at the beginning of the game. However, the interesting thing here is the supervising scientist, ID 554, which could further explain what happened to employee 555. Perhaps they were involved in an explosion in the raw science research development, and they went missing. Perhaps they were involved in the explosion in the beginning of the game due to experimentation with boiled science. One thing's certain, this time around, they're making the roles of other scientists much larger in the game than in the original Grounded. Up next could be me just overanalyzing, but this crossword puzzle that sits on this chair with a horoscope next to it. I went ahead and zoomed in on it and took a screenshot. I hope solving the crossword would provide some hidden information, but there really wasn't any there. Most of the information I gleaned from this was from the actual right side of it on the horoscope, where I spotted these hand-drawn flowers, and they reminded me very much of flowers I had seen previously at the picnic table. These flowers. While they may not be an exact replication, they are very similar in style and very childlike. And because they are located on the crossword puzzle and on the picnic table, right next to where you can locate Thor was here. Thor, of course, being Tully's son, it's not a stretch to say that these were drawn by Sarah Tully, his daughter. And if that's the case, was she at the onboarding facility? Perhaps she got bored and was writing in the book. Perhaps she was there enacting some sort of plan, working with someone. But it's not much, so what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Up next, the statue, filled with information. So as you're making your way through the statue, you're going to have to take out some of these orc cockroach nymphs. And then you're going to come to this switch here. Across from it is a whiteboard. This one. The masked stranger marked out the information with an X and nothing to see here, suggesting that it is talking about her. And so I decided to take and darken all the text underneath it and see if I could get any information from it. At the top, it clearly says subject. I'm assuming before that test subject. Some words are easier to make out than others. We can see it says at one point adverse reactions, typical changes detected, exhibits, something. And one thing I thought was interesting is at the bottom, right at the bottom of the X, it says genetic. It looks like infusion, which would be crazy, but could explain some of the masked stranger's abilities in combat. For instance, she uses this move, which has a fire blast, and she also does a mint area of effect damage, which could be from the bombardier beetle and the butterfly. Then if you continue to fight her and you knock her health down to a certain point, she then turns and leaps from the ground all the way up in the air to the top of this. This could definitely be a power gain through genetic infusion with something like a jumping spider, a grasshopper, things that won't be released until future updates, but could explain how she's able to reach such heights from the ground. And if we look to some of the notes that we can find, like the security update, it tells us that the subject remains active at unpredictable times of day and often escapes surveillance detail during shift rotations or through unconventional means of traversal, including web slinging, as ID 651 puts it. And joined to this report is an annotated copy of the recently released psychological profile conducted on the subject based off of field notes disposed after reading. The field team is of the opinion that this profile greatly understates the unstable emotional state of the subject and the possibility for catastrophic damage if she were to attack our installations. Further action under a pending approval by management. Up next, we can look at the confidential report to be delivered directly to Miss Sloan Beaumont. Below is a summarized version of our most recent psychological profile of Redacted. Despite her notable capabilities, Redacted exhibits a desire for external validation. She wants to be seen and heard, and she staged several maneuvers in front of our cameras, dismantling surveillance equipment only after she's put on a show. That being said, her distaste for authority is clear. Redacted will reject obvious solutions out of pride if she feels she cannot reclaim them as her own. This aversion has been proven useful in many ways, as Redacted has developed truly remarkable workarounds to problems that even Ominent had yet to solve. When provided with the right resources, her ingenuity rivals that of our best engineers. However, she lacks the emotional maturity and is unable to regulate her temper. For this and other reasons, she is dangerous. It is imperative that we acknowledge the risk she poses to Ominent if she be allowed to continue her activities here in the park. Please see the rest of the report for recommended procedures moving forward. When you take into account the notes that we find and the interactions we have with her, along with Miss Beaumont, it makes it clear that they know who she is, that they potentially experimented on her, and that she was being observed prior to this happening. And the report even says that they were worried that she would be able to attack all of their installments and take them out. So either the report didn't reach them in time, or they did not consider her as big a threat as they possibly should have. Either way, Ominent knows a lot more than it's letting on. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Trudy's letter to Wendell. After beating the masked stranger, I decided to make my way to an area I had yet to explore, the Rose Garden. And it was filled with a lot of higher level enemies like the mantis, more orc bugs, orb weavers, wolf spiders, and tucked underneath all these roses was the Rose Garden Outpost. Inside were things you would typically expect: a ranger station, a resource examiner, a comm station where you can talk to Sloan Beaumont, and you can find some bandages, blueberry bandages, a water tank, as well as some resources in the room in the back with the bee and the suspended fluid. But if you look in the dining room area in here, on this table, you find a letter marked to Wendell. And if you look at the actual body of the text, it says at the top, Wendell, and at the bottom, your wife, Trudy. But no matter how much I blew the image up and enhanced it, reading the body of it is just so difficult. It's written in cursive, and it's very pixelated. No matter how much I zoomed and tried to enhance, I tried increasing the contrast, the sharpness, everything. The image still remains too blurry for me to clearly make out the text. There are a few words here and there that stand out, but not enough so that I can give you an answer of what it is confidently. This is why I wanted to post it to the community, and hopefully we can all come together and decipher what this says. Maybe it's just a lore dump. Maybe it's plans for the future. Maybe it can explain why Wendell lost his mind and went crazy at the ceremony. Either way, I don't think it's a coincidence that it's found in the Rose Garden, a more romantic-looking area for the outpost. Perhaps it's something to do with Wendell and Trudy's relationship. The only way we'll find out is if we can figure out what this says. One last thing, outside of the map, at the entrance area on the table, you can find a marker with the name Welleda on it. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. However, I figure I would mention it. Maybe it has some tie into the game in some way. Perhaps somebody knows what it means. These are just some of the strange breadcrumbs scattered around Brookhollow Park. Hidden letters, duplicate photos, invisible text, mysterious flowers, and a missing scientist that could be tied to the very explosion that starts our story. But the truth is, I can't solve this alone. I need your help. If you can enhance the Trudy Wendell letter, crack the invisible text, or piece together how these clues connect, leave your theories in the comments. Together, we might just unravel the secrets of Brookhollow Park. And if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to keep going and make more videos. Thanks.